Commander Zara Thorne's presence was enough to silence any room she entered. On Station Kepler 9, even the noisy repair bay emptied the moment her Black Neck's combat armor appeared in the doorway. She had long since grown accustomed to this reaction. Her reputation as the Silent Storm followed her everywhere. A soldier who was both admired and feared, known for tactical brilliance as much as her uncompromising temper. Zara moved with controlled precision, the kind born from years of combat where every gesture meant survival. Her sharp violet eyes, a rare and unmistakable feature of her species, scanned the bay automatically, evaluating exits and potential threats. She selected a corner spot that offered her full view of every entrance before setting her plasma rifle and sidearm down with efficient care. Weapon maintenance, for her, was more than duty, it was ritual. The marks on her armor told their own story. Scorched plating still smoked faintly from the morning's battle. A mission deemed successful by Fleet Command. A civilian transport had been saved. The pirate raiders threatening the shipping lanes were neutralized. Strategic victory had been achieved. Yet, the cost still weighed on her. 3 soldiers under her command had not returned. Jenkins, a young recruit of barely 22, who had joined the fleet dreaming of adventure but met death in the belly of a pirate torpedo bay. Martinez, an experienced engineer who had lived through countless battles, only to fall while protecting innocents who would never know his name. And Okafor, whose dry humor had kept the unit's spirits alive through the darkest deployments. Their loss lingered with Zara, despite knowing the mission metrics were a success. She understood the harsh arithmetic of command. Saving many often meant sacrificing few. But knowing this never made it easier. She settled into her routine, carefully cleaning the plasma chamber of her rifle, each stroke of the rod steady and methodical, almost meditative. The steady hum of diagnostic machines and the faint crackle of plasma welding filled the silence. Here, in the repair bay, she could exist outside the gaze of command and politics. Here, she was not the commander but simply Zara, a soldier who carried too many ghosts. The door hissed open again, pulling her from her thoughts. Instinctively, her hand moved to her sidearm, only to ease when she recognized the steady, unhurried gait of someone who belonged there. Chief Engineer Marcus Reid entered, tablet in hand, his expression focused on technical calculations rather than her intimidating presence. Unlike everyone else who had fled at her arrival, he didn't hesitate. He simply gave her a short nod of acknowledgement, the same one he would have offered to any colleague, and turned to the atmospheric processors awaiting his attention. Zara watched him curiously, expecting him to make his excuses once he realized who she was. Most did. Stories of her confrontations with admirals, officers, and enemies alike circulated across the fleet. Few chose to share her space willingly. Yet Marcus remained, absorbed in his work, his calm competence filling the silence in a way that felt strangely grounding. For the first time in weeks, Zara's shoulders eased, if only slightly. Marcus Reid didn't treat her like a living legend or a walking storm. He simply went about his engineering duties, running diagnostics on the plasma conduits, recalibrating systems, and making small adjustments without fuss. His steady presence contrasted sharply with the hushed avoidance of everyone else on the station. Zara found herself waiting for the moment he would break the silence, to ask about her missions, her reputation, or the scars on her armor. But he never did. He just worked, as if her presence was no more remarkable than the machinery humming around them. At first, Zara was unsettled by this. Silence in her life was usually loaded, the silence of soldiers waiting for orders, or the silence after a casualty report. But Marcus's silence was different. It wasn't fearful, nor was it deferential. It was steady, professional, and oddly companionable. The rhythm of his tools against metal, the quiet hum of recalibrated processors, even the occasional mutter about faulty temperature regulators became a strange kind of music. She cleaned her weapons, he repaired systems. Together, they filled the bay with parallel routines that somehow harmonized. For the first time in months, Zara allowed herself to relax. The rigid military posture she carried everywhere. Back straight, jaw tight, eyes constantly alert, softened, just slightly, when Marcus was around. He never intruded on her thoughts, never tried to fix the grief or the weight of her command. He simply shared the space, leaving it better than he found it. That alone was more valuable to her than any attempt at comfort. Days passed. Their pattern repeated itself with small, almost imperceptible shifts. One day, Marcus casually remarked about the environmental systems compensating too hard. Another day, Zara noticed how his recalibration had made the air feel smoother, the temperature more balanced. He didn't speak directly to her, but his presence made the bay feel less like a tomb of ghosts and more like a place where breathing was possible. Then came the first small exchange. On his 5th day of coincidentally timing maintenance with her presence, Marcus found an extra cup of coffee sitting by his toolkit. The brew was the standard bitter station issue, nothing special, but its placement was deliberate. Zara didn't acknowledge it, and Marcus didn't comment. He simply accepted it, just as he accepted her silence. The following week, he left behind a worn technical manual on plasma rifle maintenance, its margins filled with handwritten notes from years of field experience. The next day, the manual was gone, replaced with a small data chip Zara had left on his station. Inside were advanced schematics from her own species' combat engineering techniques, improvements for atmospheric systems that could boost efficiency by 12% under stress. They weren't trading gifts. They were trading knowledge, professional trust disguised as practical resources. The repair bay slowly transformed. Other personnel began to treat it as something sacred. Technicians moved carefully, speaking in hushed tones, as if stepping into a library rather than a workspace. Without intending it, Marcus and Zara had created a sanctuary, a rare place on a military station where rank and reputation melted away, leaving only mutual respect. On the 10th day, the silence between them broke in a new way. Zara, still cleaning her weapons with clinical precision, remarked quietly, "Your plasma couplings are running a fraction below optimal." Her voice was calm, professional, but the fact that she addressed him directly was significant. Marcus looked up from his console and replied with equal practicality, "I'll check on that. Been meaning to recalibrate the diagnostics anyway." She nodded once. For her, it was not just information sharing. It was an unspoken acknowledgement that she trusted him. It was in these quiet exchanges, stripped of ceremony, that something deeper took root. Not friendship yet, not vulnerability, but the first signs of trust. And for Zara Thorne, who carried silence like armor, that trust was more precious than she could admit. The fragile routine they had built was disrupted at 3:47 one morning when the station's alarms tore through the quiet. The distinct cadence of the klaxon meant only one thing: civilian ships under attack. Zara Thorne was already in motion before most had left their bunks. By the time Marcus stepped into the corridor, she was a different figure entirely. Gone was the soldier cleaning her weapons in silence. In her place stood the commander, armor pristine, weapons checked, eyes blazing with lethal focus. She moved like a living weapon, every step carrying the inevitability of command. But Marcus, who had come to know the subtler details, noticed what others missed. Beneath the flawless composure, her hands trembled as she adjusted her helmet's display. Her breathing was slightly too controlled, the rhythm too practiced. Her violet eyes carried not only resolve but also the weight of decisions she knew would scar her. The briefing confirmed the crisis. 3 colony ships were besieged by organized pirate raiders. Civilian protection was paramount. Secondary objectives included neutralizing the attackers and restoring control of the lanes. Zara was assigned to lead the tactical response aboard the destroyer Meridian, supported by Marines and fighter craft. She accepted the orders with perfect military precision. Yet Marcus, reading the tiny shifts in her armor-clad body, recognized the storm of calculations and doubts she carried silently. When the meeting ended, personnel hurried to their stations. Marcus found himself trailing Zara, not intentionally at first, but because something in him resisted letting her go without one more word, or at least one more silence. She had retreated to the repair bay, their sanctuary, running diagnostics on her rifle. Marcus almost smiled. The weapon was flawless. He had checked it himself only days earlier. But she still rechecked, her motions revealing more need for grounding than for maintenance. "Marcus," she said suddenly, without looking up. It was the first time she had spoken his name. He blinked, taken aback, then answered, "Commander." Her tone remained practical, almost clinical. "Your atmospheric processor is running slightly below optimal efficiency. Won't impact performance, but thought you should know." The symmetry of the exchange, her using his own language of technical precision, struck him deeply. Even as she faced war, she held on to the unspoken bond they had built through shared routines. "I'll take care of it while you're gone," Marcus promised. She sealed her rifle with a snap. "Good." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "The coffee here remains unacceptable." It was the closest thing to humor he had heard from her. Marcus offered softly, "I'll work on improving that, too." She turned toward him fully, violet eyes meeting his. For the first time, he saw not the silent storm but Zara, someone carrying unbearable weight yet unwilling to lay it down. Her words were deliberate, heavy. "Thank you for sitting with me." He answered simply, "Thank you for letting me." And then she was gone, striding toward deployment with lethal precision, leaving Marcus standing amidst the humming machines. The repair bay felt unbalanced in her absence, as though a vital system had been taken offline. He threw himself into work, more restless than usual. He optimized processors already in perfect condition, rebuilt components that didn't need rebuilding, and even tackled the loathed coffee dispenser with parts from his own supplies, determined to improve it. 3 weeks, he told himself. That was how long the mission was scheduled. He knew military timelines rarely held, but he found himself counting the days anyway. During those weeks, he kept their routine alive. He brewed coffee and left it in her usual spot, even though she wasn't there to drink it. He maintained the bay to flawless condition, as though preparing for her return. He missed her presence, missed the quiet exchanges, and most of all, missed the silence they shared. A silence that wasn't empty, but alive. On the 18th day, word reached the station. Mission successful. All 3 colony ships saved. Raiders neutralized. Shipping lanes secured. The fleet called it a triumph. Marcus, however, understood what the reports never said. Victory always came with invisible costs, and he knew Zara would return carrying them. So he prepared the bay, not just as a workspace, but as a sanctuary waiting for her. 21 days later, Commander Zara Thorne returned to Station Kepler 9. Her black armor bore fresh scorch marks, and her violet eyes carried the heaviness of someone who had made impossible choices. By official reports, the mission was flawless. Civilians saved, raiders eliminated, objectives secured. But Marcus had worked long enough in the fleet to know what success concealed. Tactical victories always hid personal losses. He was already in the repair bay when she arrived. Not by coincidence, by intention. The processors hummed at peak efficiency. The plasma conduits were tuned to perfection. Even the rebuilt coffee dispenser, hacked together from parts he wasn't technically allowed to use, stood ready. Zara paused at the door, scanning the room as if making sure it was still theirs, then walked to her corner with visible relief. "Atmospheric Processor 7 is running smoothly," she noted as she set her kit down. "Good engineering tends to be persistent," Marcus replied, adjusting a conduit that didn't actually need adjusting. "And the coffee?" she asked, her tone lighter than before. "Addressed," he said, nodding at the machine. The new coffee wasn't excellent, but it was drinkable, which, by station standards, was a triumph. She tested it, then allowed the faintest hint of approval to flicker across her face. "That's well beyond protocol." "Sometimes systems need more than protocol," Marcus answered. They both knew he wasn't just talking about coffee. Their routine resumed, but it felt different now. Weighted with the trust built before deployment and strengthened by absence. For a while, they worked in silence, the kind that needed no explanation. Finally, Zara spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Deployment went well. All objectives achieved. Minimal casualties. Textbook execution." Her words sounded rehearsed, the language of reports and strategy briefings. But Marcus had learned to hear what lay between the words. She was telling him that she carried more than statistics. She was offering him a sliver of the weight she bore. He didn't interrupt. He let her continue. We boarded the pirate command ship. 17 surrendered once leadership was gone. 43 fought to the death. If I'd waited for backup, maybe more would have lived. But civilians would have died in the delay. She reassembled her rifle slowly, each motion precise. 3,000 civilians alive. 43 enemies dead. Mathematically correct. Tactically sound. Morally defensible. And I'll see their faces forever. Marcus set aside his tools and looked at her directly. That weight you feel, it's not a flaw. It's proof you're making those choices with the right awareness. Anyone who didn't feel it shouldn't be trusted with command. She studied him, violet eyes searching his face for insincerity. Finding none, she exhaled. It wasn't the sharp, controlled breath of a soldier bracing for battle, but the release of tension she rarely allowed herself. For the first time, she believed his words enough to ease her burden. "Marcus," she said softly, her tone carrying warmth he hadn't heard before. "Thank you for sitting with me, for not asking questions I couldn't answer, for understanding." He smiled, genuine and unguarded. "Thank you for trusting me with the seat beside you." Then, in a gesture more intimate than any words, Zara removed her helmet. Silver hair spilled free, catching the bay's lights. She set the helmet aside carefully and tasted the new coffee again. "Better," she said simply. They returned to their parallel tasks, but now their silence was layered with something new. Understanding, acceptance, and an unspoken promise. Before leaving that evening, Zara told him quietly, "The deployment was easier because I knew this place would be here. Because I knew you'd be here." Marcus replied with the same steady certainty he applied to every system he maintained. "It always will be, as long as you need it." She smiled, rare and genuine, then left with her usual efficiency. And in that moment, Marcus realized what they had built was not just routine, not just sanctuary, but a bond, forged not through words or grand gestures, but through presence, trust, and silence shared when no one else dared to sit beside her.